when you're both looking up to the Lord, you're growing closer and closer together as you go through these processes.
Right.
So, for example, it's not about you anymore, right? It's not about either of you, really. It's about doing the right thing. It's about a higher goal. Our relationship is not just looking at it. Our relationship is way bigger than us. Way bigger, way more spiritual, way more possible. And if you open yourself up to the idea that God is up there and God wants to be in your relationship, it makes all the difference in the world.
Hello, and welcome to the Mysteries of Faith show. Here we explore religion and life through a Swedenborgian Christian perspective. In this series, we're joined by Grant Schnarr, author, teacher, minister, and spiritual leader. We delve chapter by chapter into his book, You Can Believe, an introduction to new Christianity. Enjoy. And we're talking today about love, specifically
Big subject.
marriage, actually.
Mm-hmm. Love and marriage.
Yes, we've talked a lot about love.
Esoteric love or whatever.
Yeah, or divine love,
Right, well, that's right,
or the
right.
love of God, love in trying to be a better person, the love that's in all of us. But today we're talking about love,
Right,
like
exactly,
marriage.
right.
And the chapter is called, what was it?
Does love last forever?
Yeah, does love last forever? So, marriage, love, that romantic marriage love. Can that last forever?
Well, right there you go. That romantic marriage love. So I mean,
I did that on
you
purpose.
did, I know, right? So now I got to untangle that.
That's
right?
why I asked it the way I did. So untangle.
True love can last forever. A deep, lasting friendship between two people who are giving to each other, who are growing both individually and together, looking out to become one in the usefulness that they do for the world. Yeah, that kind of thing goes on forever, after we die.
Wait,
romance
so
is how
there.
we get into it. Okay, go ahead.
So pause there. So when you say true love, where we have contentment and friendship and
true
can
love,
last forever, you just said it. You added at the end, even beyond our death.
Yeah,
To eternity. Forever, we're not talking till death do us part.
Right. I don't use that phrase. I mean, my church, which you may know of.
Oh yeah.
The new church, General Church of the New Jerusalem. We don't use that phrase until death do you part, because we believe that true love never dies. That two people who are committed to each other, working together, spiritually and growing, can end up living together for eternity. Can and will, if that's what they choose to do, and they would if they loved each other like that.
But not necessarily.
Well, not necessarily. You're getting me all kinds of stuff right away. No,
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
no one's going to get stuck with somebody. It's not like marriage is eternal. Like, you marry somebody here, never got along, whatever, and then you're going to be with them for eternity. I'm talking about love.
Right.
Love, connection,
and marriage.
commitment, love and marriage. Yeah.
Right. So in other words, when counseling a young couple who might be wanting to get married, one of the things I always would say to them is, in these marriage vows that you're going to give to each other, you need to know that when I do the vows, I'm not going to say, till death do you part. But that doesn't mean that it necessarily lasts forever. But I would say that most people who are getting married want to imagine,
Right.
hey, it could last forever.
Yeah. I think the whole thing, I mean, why is that important? I do the same thing. I say, listen, there's several important things I want to get across to them before we go forward with a wedding. But, that one is critical, I think, because when you say till death do you part, you're making a commitment, but it's almost like a horizontal flat commitment. I'm going to be with you. Hey, I love you. I'm going to be with you for the next 40 years or 50 or 30 or whatever it is. And then it's going to be over, right? So let's just take this ride together. Whereas if you say, I love you forever, I'm going to be with you forever. There's no limits on that whatsoever. It takes something that's very flat and maybe what you might call material or natural view of marriage. Suddenly just opens it up into being something spiritual, unending, grow forever type thing with, just take the lid right off and say, this is forever.
Yeah.
This is outside of time and space.
Yeah. If you want it to be, it can really be forever.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's work for a moment under the assumption that a couple may be watching this, or an individual might be watching this, and does want it to last forever.
Mm-hmm.
But we've been saying can, could, might. should, if you want it to, what can make love in marriage, real love, last forever? What do they do?
Well, make it simple. I mean, really, is number one, actually commit. I mean, meaning
Right.
like I want to be with you for the rest of eternity or my life or whatever. I'm committing myself to being there for you. You go through the vows of marriage and love, honor, and this and that. I mean, they're all good things and most of what people say, and respond to. But it is to pledge that you will be with someone, that you will care for them, that you will grow together in good times and bad times. I think the key though within that is that I will take care of myself and grow myself so that I can be more loving to you and a better partner. I think that's really key if you were to say what makes a good marriage. But it's a commitment.
Right.
I'd say it's a commitment to one another. I think you have to look outside of yourself. I think bringing God into your relationship, however you even see God, an authority greater than yourselves that you can both look to, is key. And to work on yourself. Don't just think the other person's going to meet all your needs.
Right. That
Yeah.
work on yourself, I think, is key.
Yeah.
I remember even as a young person before I was married, the advice I got, if you want to find someone to be married to, look yourself in the mirror and think, am I worth marrying? And then now as a husband, I have that same attitude. Am I a better man now than when I first married my wife? And if I want my marriage to continue to grow and flourish and potentially to eternity, then I have to think, well, am I working on becoming a better version of myself, a more honorable husband, a more honorable man, a more God-fearing person? And if I'm working on that, great.
Yeah, I don't see how you can fail. I mean, well, you got to.
Well, I can.
I just mean, like, with that kind of an attitude, you're on the right track. I mean, you're heading the right direction. I didn't say it was going to be easy, but today's world, and I think it's part of nature and life that when you meet somebody, there's the wow factor.
That romance, we were
right?
talking
The
about.
romance that gets built up and all the heart pounding and all that and everything it means and. Everybody loves that. Everybody wants that. I mean, it's a good thing, and it's something that we all. I hope we could all experience at some time or another in our lives.
And it seems to power most pop culture,
right? But it's not the be all and end all. That is not that. I don't know anybody who has gotten married that hadn't in some way or another confessed that fades. I mean, they can still say, "Oh, we still go on dates and all that together, or we're cute together and all that." Yeah, but that initial feeling or sense or belief, this person's going to meet all my needs. What they do for me, they make me feel better. They make me feel important. They make me feel as if I can, whatever it would be. And it's all about me, 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 me. I mean,
the key word there was me.
Me, 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 right? Now, that's all cool and great. I mean, it's nature's way of getting us together, I think, But then and I'm not saying, I mean, what can happen is that beautiful romance can naturally turn to something, a deep, beautiful friendship, a deep, beautiful spiritual connection that maybe even is more delightful and more exciting than that cheesy romance that started out being. So that's very possible, but oftentimes it kind of wanes, after a while, and then the real work begins. I guess I got to get into the game here and start giving more, or that realization that nothing in the world can make me happy unless I choose to make myself happy by living a good life and a loving life.
Yeah, and I think that idea of marriage can be forever puts perspective on those hard times. Like when I am going through a hard time in my marriage, my wife and I have talked about this because pretty much we're not going to get divorced over fighting about how to parent or money or whatever. Like we're looking long term. We're going to try and find a way to make it work. And trying to find a way to make it work is really, especially when you've got that long-term perspective. You're looking at this person like, oh, this is someone that I could end up with to eternity. It puts a lot of other smaller things in perspective and makes even things that could be perceived as larger pretty small.
Absolutely.
Yeah, really. So You've mentioned a few times the idea that there are going to be hard things in marriage. What does a couple do when they get into those hard times? Like, what are some key things that a couple can do when confronting with really hard things?
Well, I mean, a lot of it depends on the circumstances. If you want to look at, whether it's communication or, values or, seeing, having some kind of a delusional thinking in certain areas of, your own personal life or whatever that you need to discover and bring forth. So there's all kinds of different things depending on what the circumstance is, and I'm not an expert in that regard. But when it comes to spiritual things, I think one of the keys is, and another thing that I talk about prior to doing a wedding is that how important it is to use the teachings that the Lord has given us, a lot, the ones that, the Lord Jesus has given us in the New Testament in our own relationship. Or if whatever religion you are, use those teachings that you are critical for your own growth, focus them consciously on how you are living your relationship with each other, and it'll make a huge difference. So there, Jesus saying, forgive and you will be forgiven. It's easy to forgive somebody down the street for pulling in front of you in the car or whatever, but there's sometimes, people, families, they can hurt each other. I mean,
Right.
there's something about, somebody well enough, how to really get them, or whatever,
Right.
or maybe you don't even think you're going, it's going to hurt, but it does. And but so forgiving on that level, right there with that person that I'm living with is huge. Go the second mile. Jesus talks about, don't go one, go all the way and more to be able to be there, with your spouse. And I could go on and on there, but all those teachings of Jesus are so beautiful, as we all know. And they're very easy to do when the neighbor is the person next door or whatever, but the neighbor right there sleeping beside us, or squeezing the toothpaste the wrong way, and it's really ticking you off or whatever. That's the one, you use those teachings, and that will help tremendously.
Yeah, and you mentioned a lot of teachings there, about humility, forgiveness,
there's so many.
repentance, self-examination,
Absolutely.
accountability, a lot of religious principles. And it's interesting that we're talking about them as religious principles. At the beginning, you mentioned how a key is bringing the Lord into your marriage. And I know an example that a lot of new church ministers and other ministers use is the idea that if you have two people looking to the Lord, then that draws them towards each other, sort of like a triangle almost. Or as I like to think about it is, if you have two people arguing about something, but they share a third or higher power, and that person's authority, then it's no longer my will against your will. It's the two of us trying to figure out what the Lord's will is for us.
Absolutely.
And that is no longer a power struggle. It's working together.
Absolutely. I use that triangle too. I don't know who created that idea, and put it up there on the board for the first time.
I think it's geometry.
But I love it. Two people here, you can go like this and look right at each other. And that could either be fighting like that, or it could be trying to get your needs met. But when you're both looking up to the Lord, you're growing closer and closer together as you go through these processes. Right. So, for example, it's not about you anymore, right? It's not about either of you, really. It's about doing the right thing. It's about a higher goal. Our relationship is not just looking at it. Our relationship is way bigger than us, way bigger, way more spiritual, way more possible. And if you open yourself up to the idea that God is up there and God wants to be in your relationship, it makes all the difference in the world.
Right.
For one, if there is, I often say, if there is a God, kind of feel like there might be, right? If there is a God, and God is all powerful and all loving, all love, powerful love, why wouldn't you want him in your relationship, right?
Right.
I mean, to invite that love in through prayer. It's one thing praying. I pray with my wife at the end of the night or whatever, when going to bed, or like reading the Word. We're working our way through we're going right through the Bible right now.
Together.
Yeah. I don't know if we'll make it. I'm getting older. It takes a long time, but wow, but also, I mean, there's so many other things: being useful, finding things that you love to do that are helpful to other people, talking, working on yourselves. Talk about your life, not just simply what'd you do today, honey, but I mean, like, really get into like what's going on with you, and then
Right.
being there for support. So that brings it's not just that the name God is in our relationship, but God is here, present. We bring God down and with all of these things. But the other one that you said, I think that you were saying, talking about, is looking to that higher thing that takes you outside of yourself. Um, I see that also with individuals who, when they go through that dry period of like, it's not working for me anymore, or temptations. I mean, thou shalt not commit adultery. That's in there because people are tempted to do it in the, 10 Commandments. When you get to a point, I think I've worked with a lot, maybe it's true of men and women. I've worked with a lot of men over the years and in a lot of the things I've done. And I've heard guys tell me, and you don't know who they are, whatever, but more than once that, Christian men, that they've gotten to a point where they really just wanted to get out of their relationship. Maybe there was even somebody else that there was a potential for. They knew it was wrong. They knew they could work on this thing. And it would come down to, there's nothing inside. I remember one guy saying, there's nothing inside of me that wants to stay with this person anymore. Why should I?
Right.
And then he said, this voice came in and said to him through his own conscience, because God said so.
Right.
And he said, as soon as he said, oh, I get that, and flipped the switch almost, things started getting better almost instantly. All of a sudden, most of the stuff that he was feeling was illusion, or, and that he was right back in the game. And the way he was telling us in a smaller group, whatever, confidential, which I'm blind. No, you don't know who it is, but is that that works, it made all the difference. I could have just really lost myself, my family, my wife, and everything if I had taken another direction. But because of God and because of having that principles, higher than yourself, I was able to turn that around, or God was able to turn that around.
Yeah, and that because God said so is a really, for me, a core fundamental, not just in marriage, but in all of my spiritual life.
Oh, yeah.
Like when I think about why I shouldn't lie. Well, I shouldn't lie because it hurts people. I shouldn't lie because, society would be worse off if everyone was a liar. I shouldn't lie because I might get in trouble, yada, yada, yada. But also, God said, don't lie. So don't lie. And that solves a lot of problems, because all these other reasons I could say, oh, well, maybe it wouldn't hurt someone. Oh, well, maybe not everyone's society is going to do it. Oh, well, and it's excuse after excuse after excuse. But when you get to that fundamental reason, God said so, it clears away, like you said, the illusions of the argument and lets you focus on the truth. And then those reasonings become more reasonable. Like if you say, why am I going to stick with her? Because God said so. And then you start thinking, oh, and actually there are all these other good things in my marriage worth fighting for.
Absolutely. It's interesting just now, even thinking about, there's an analogy there, even with how you approach the Bible. I mean, like, I think nowadays, we're very clear, like Jesus brought out some great teachings about, like, here's why, you should love one another. And we know Swedenborg does that completely. He tries to explain everything about why you want to be good. That's not simply because God said so, but there's a reason. But when you're really into temptation, it doesn't matter, all those things in your mind, it doesn't matter. It might come right down to, okay, I'll do it because God says so. I have no other, bottom line. That's bottom line, where God says, thou shalt not. We can get back to that point.
That's that foundation,
right? The
that
foundation,
you build your house on.
Right. But once we hit that thou shalt not, if we have to hit it at that, then, like you're saying, it build back up, and then you can all of a sudden hear all the teachings that were given in the New Testament about, here's why, here's an alternative, here's love, here's something positive. And then I love it. You get to Swedenborg and it's completely built out into everything. I mean, about, eternity, like we're talking about in marriage and giving and all that, and pointing to, how in the Old and New Testament, actually, it does show us the way.
Right.
So I don't know, just an interesting thing.
Now, two things I want to talk about. One is, I think it'd be useful to talk a little bit about specifics, because we talked about a lot of different teachings that can help a marriage. So that would be one. And so let's do that for a moment. So we talked about forgiveness, And I really like that. And on an earlier episode, we talked about how there's sort of these two versions of repentance or shunning evil or working on spiritual life. The more intentional, proactive, every now and then more the day-to-day reactive. And I think about that with forgiveness too. You know, the Lord said we should wash each other's feet because in the ancient world, people walked around, their feet got dirty naturally. So forgive them of all the dumb stuff. You know, my wife is not going to squeeze out the toothpaste right. She's not going to load the dishwasher right. She's not going to fold the laundry correctly. What?
Well, at least she's throwing the laundry.
well, there's that. But also, like, correctly? What is that all about? That's just dumb.
I know, but that kind of thing plays in. I mean, couples go nuts over that stuff.
I know, and that's where, like, just let go.
Yeah.
Like, let go of your resentment and your frustration. Oh, it is. But that's
But
essential.
that's it, right? That's
right.
That's the Christian way. I mean, that's what Jesus is teaching. Let go. You got to let go.
Exactly.
And it's interesting because forgiveness basically means let go. Let go of. It doesn't mean, it doesn't mean, oh, okay, now I've got to, do your wash and, get more toothpaste or whatever it might be. And, no, it means just let go of that. Let them be who they are.
Well, I also love in Leviticus, right before that core teaching, love your neighbor. The intro to love your neighbor is, you shall not bear a grudge.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's foundational to loving your neighbor. If you're going to love your wife, love your husband, don't bear a grudge.
Yeah.
If they did do something stupid, don't be like, well, they've done something stupid and churn that over in your heart and like make it really.
Well, that's a huge one.
Oh,
yeah,
poison.
And that's something you find a lot, or in marriage and tough times where there's something somebody's holding on to, or they get into. Swedenborg talks a lot about the love of dominion. Yeah. It's not just control. Some of his translations they say love of control, and I think we can relate to that. We like to control our worlds, and if we don't like what they're doing, maybe we could somehow control them. But the love of dominion, dominating over somebody, it's, we're going to do what I want to do. I have a vision for this marriage. I have a vision for our life, for our kids, for where we're going to live, for, anything like that. And it can be subtle too. I mean, but so many times I've seen this where people are jockeying for position, who's going to be on top.
Fight.
It's a power struggle. Yeah. God put that down. Now, again, but for the grace of God go I. I mean, I've dealt with all these things in my heart as well as anybody else, but can see very clearly that's one that really, and that's another God thing. Right. I mean, because there's some other reason I need to let go of this. Why wouldn't I want to have it my way?
Right. And in this relationship, why should I think that I am the person in charge? Because obviously I'm not.
Right.
God is.
Right.
And
so, yeah.
I can't be the boss. I think that relates to a core teaching that we haven't talked about. That is core and fundamental to the new church. And that is that in a marriage relationship, no one's supposed to be subservient.
Right.
Like a woman is not supposed to be subservient to her husband. That I think is a core difference between Swedenborgian Christianity and a lot of traditional Christianity. Can you talk a little bit about why is it so important that we don't believe that women should be subservient?
Well, that's so interesting that we'd even have to say that. I mean, and now in today's world, because, you would think, well, duh, of course there's, equal partners and they bring equal into the, I'm not saying, but a lot of people do. A lot of people don't believe that.
In the secular world, they do have that right.
Yeah, but you're right. I mean, the religions tend to do it a different way or whatever, and you could get into all kinds of reasons why that might be, male-dominated, religions are the way it's been operated and stuff like that. So that's there, but it is interesting, even like the things that are in the New Testament about Paul talking about. Paul really is the one that brings it out and says, I'm not going to do any quote from Paul or anything, but basically that the wife should be the subservient to the husband or whatever. And but more and more Christians today realize, there's got to be some other way of reading that. That just can't be true. Practically, I think we can see that. It just makes common sense and rationality that each husband and wife bring together something equal to the relationship, different, equal but different, right. and are of absolute value and necessity to be recognized, loved, valued, and allowed to participate fully in that relationship. That's what makes it.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's essential too, because it's so easy to take something that sounds okay at first, like, oh, well, Paul said so, subservient, but then it starts creating an excuse for that love of dominion, for that love of control, for being obnoxious and horrid, frankly. It gives us an excuse for bad behavior. And I just think, nope, you got to shun that. Like, it is equal totally.
Yeah. Now, I think it can go with the other. It's interesting because you mentioned secular. I mean, I think number one, I think a lot of people have seen some of these. It's not just Christianity that has these teachings or traditions about male dominance, but people look at that at what religion does there, and they just throw it out. Like, oh, I don't believe that, so they absolutely cut themselves off from any principles. And what's interesting is I think we can see a lot in today's world that there's a whole different movement that's kind of like, well, men are worthless. Men, what do they bring to a relationship? Or men start wars and this and that, and they don't, they're whatever, they don't know what they're doing. They have no feelings, and so it can go both ways. No, men have a lot to offer. Or so do women.
The idea that men are only useful if they can somehow shun their masculinity.
Yeah.
Like, don't be strong.
Yeah.
Don't be...
Right. A really strong man doesn't really stand up for anything.
I don't know. Right.
Which doesn't make any sense.
And we can go...
some other time. Well, let's really get into that one.
Yeah. So the other big thing I wanted to ask you about, because we've been talking about this almost like we're assuming a couple would like marriage to last to eternity. And in other episodes, we've talked about how the plan for the Lord... of us, the Lord's plan for each of us is that we each become an angel, that we live to eternity in heaven as angels. So what does that look like? What is eternal marriage in the other life? Like, are we just describe it? Are we old in heaven? Are we like...
No, we got it. Swedenborg says something.
Detailed.
Oh, come on. I mean, that's good. I mean,
It's core.
Our next episode is on the afterlife, I believe. But
I know.
So I mean, Swedenborg says more about that than anything else. But in this regard, with marriage, so much could be said. One of the things he does say, though, is that people don't grow old in heaven. They grow into the springtime of their youth, whatever that means. Very poetic. Which is interesting because I'm going to do it. Near-death people who have the near-death experience often say, die and then come back. They saw their grandmother and she was young. I mean, that happens a lot. People see older people that are in the springtime of their youth, which I find so cool because that's what Swedenborg said, a couple hundred years ago. But the thing about that is that, so you think about here, this couple, they may be growing wise, they may be growing, they are deeply growing in all facets of their lives. But they're wonderful, beautiful young people running around having a gas,
Right.
And the other thing he talks about, which I love, I mean, it's a little esoteric, but he says if you were to look at these people, like a couple, from a distance, an angelic couple, they would look like one person.
Right.
One person walking around, like walking through the fields or, whatever they're doing. And then Swedenborg even had this experience approaching closer and saying, no, they were actually two. And what that's symbolic of, or even more than that, correspondential to, or however you want to put it, is that's the oneness that's inside of them. I mean, that the spirits are one. In just the way we were talking about, the man and woman bringing everything they have to that relationship and it being valued and brought into that relationship, it just goes like this. I mean, and so they are actually one. One in spirit, one in soul, maybe two in body or appearance. I mean,
Right.
But it's a beautiful thing.
I think it's important to also say that, and we're going to talk about this a lot in the next episode, is that people who are angels in heaven are still human. Mm-hmm. They still have arms, legs.
Right.
They're still fully human. And yes, couples in heaven are still married. Mm-hmm. They sleep together, they live together, they work together, they eat together. In all the ways that couples are human here on earth, they are in heaven, just without illness, without age, in all the ways that are good and useful. And again, we'll talk about it more next time.
Yeah.
But also, they're useful. They're not just sitting around eating
Right.
grapes.
Right.
Which, stay tuned, we'll
Yeah,
talk about
yeah.
more next time.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, there's that marriage that's, and I
Yeah.
think that's helpful for me because I think about what I want in my marriage now. You talking about how they come together in spirit. And I think about when we're praying together or reading the word together or talking about some of our hardest struggles or deepest fears and dreams, our minds are becoming closer together, and our hearts and our dreams and our wishes and our thoughts, they are becoming closer and closer together. And that's why it's so important, like you said, to have that shared religious belief as foundational to everything that we do.
So people really can live happily ever after.
Yes, they can. That doesn't mean they do. So I want to ask one last question, and this is about forgiveness and about marriages that don't last forever. Sometimes marriages fail, and that's hard. Are we meant to forgive everything that happens in a marriage? Do all
No.
marriages
Well, it
must?
depends what you mean by forgive.
Right.
I mean, I think it's clear and almost, I mean, if I want to be safe and say, I mean, very safe to say every religion that I know of, I mean, if someone has been unfaithful, I mean, that's an option to get out. I mean, like, okay, because something has been broken there, it doesn't mean you have to, but I mean, it's hard to come back from that. I mean, people, again, I've counseled a lot of people, I've spoken to a lot of people. It's very difficult to come back from that. You can, I mean, if that's what you choose to do, but unfaithfulness really, really, really hurts, and we could get into that a lot. And there's, things like that. I think, I'm not saying, there isn't you need to get in some way or another escape from something that's just really hurting you. I mean,
Or dangerous.
or dangerous or anything. I mean, like, sure, we're not saying, stick
Right.
that out and forgive everybody. So in that sense, I mean, forgiveness means to let go of, like you said, the resentment, the this or that. I mean, I think with anything that somebody does to you, I mean, it's not going to happen immediately, but I mean, as you're growing in your spiritual life, if you're sitting there every day hating on that person, and maybe you got a divorce and you're still hating on them for decades after decades, who's that hurting? They may not even know it. It's hurting you. So it's simply the idea of, like, look, I mean, Jesus said, if somebody does something to you, take it to one or two people and talk about it and try to reconcile it, or goes on and says, finally, take it to the church. If the person's still not willing to hear you, consider them a heathen and a publican, which basically means let them go. They're jerks, I mean, but don't hate on them. But
right.
don't hate on them. Just let them go. I mean, you don't have to go, oh, I love that person. I'm so glad that they committed adultery or something like that. I've learned so much. No, it's like, let them go. What a jerk. Hey, I wish the best for you,
Right.
So even there, I mean, forgiveness is across the board. And that's a hard saying for a lot of
Right.
people. But forgiveness, being an unforgiving person, you're just really hurting yourself.
Right.
So it's a goal.
Right. So it's that marriage can end, but even if it does, in your heart, you've got to let go of that resentment because it's just poison.
Right. Well, absolutely. And again, I think that it's really very important to say. I mean, we know it. I mean, marriages fail. I mean, it happens. And we're not putting I'm not trying to put some kind of guilt trip on people for that. I mean, yeah, it happens, and it's sad. And, families are hurt, and we could go through the whole thing. But what Swedenborg puts forth simply is, but there's a star up there. It's almost like, follow that star in the...
There's an ideal.
Yeah, it's an ideal. Strive for it. Find it. Go there. Like with the Christmas story, that star, you're going to find the Lord in a manger, and it's the same kind of principle in the sense of, like, there's a star up there.
Yeah.
Believe in that. Follow that star.
Yeah, and in the chapter in your book, you talk about how it's an ideal that we can look towards. But you also talk about how there was, maybe you remember this story, but that you were doing a wedding for a couple. Did you want to tell that story about the woman?
Well,
and her tears?
sure I can. I mean, so
We'll end with
I'll
this
tell it with
story.
my, my version now. I mean, I haven't read, but the idea there was that way back when there was this couple that came together, and I knew that this woman had been through a lot. Both of them had been through a lot. And I think this was afterwards, she told me this, that she had, just gone through a lot of what you might call unhealthy relationships, very young, and they kept happening and happening. And she really felt like, who was she to?
That she wasn't worthy.
She wasn't worthy. Well, what was interesting was I didn't know that at the time. I'm getting ready to marry them. It was a beautiful story, and I'm back in the what you call the vestry, where the minister gets robed, and I hear someone crying in the empty church, just sobbing, and so I look out, and it's the bride, and I'm like, oh my goodness, and I go over and I go, hey, what's wrong? What's wrong? You okay? And she just said, I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy. And I said, what do you mean? And she goes, after all I've been through, I'm not worthy. The Lord has brought me to this point where I'd found my husband, and I get a second chance. I get another chance to do this the right way. And I'm not worthy. She meant like, I'm just so overwhelmed with joy,
Right.
And what's fun is that was, I don't know, decades and decades ago, and they're still married, and have kids, married, all that, and just awesome.
Yeah, I love that, and I think the thing I'd love to leave our viewers and listeners with is, if you are like that woman or man, and you have been through a mess,
You can come back.
you can come back, and
Yeah.
guess what? You are worthy,
Yeah.
and
That's true in every way.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and if you have been in a marriage and it has fallen apart, the Lord says, look, it can still happen for you. And if it doesn't happen on earth, you could find your partner
Yeah.
in heaven.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, like, if people that are trying to do the right thing and in life and are going to be in a heavenly relationship, if they don't find that partner here, they will in the other world.
Yeah, the Lord knows you're worthy.
Mm-hmm.
Keep working on it,
Yep.
and he will bless you. If not here on earth, then in heaven.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you, Grant.
Thank you.
And we need to talk more about life after death.
Oh,
I think.
yeah, we do.
All right. And thank you for joining us.